YouTube. The recording has just started. So welcome to Mainline MUFON. Thank you, Craig, so much for being with us. This is our November program, and I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about Craig Campobasso, whom I feel really gifted and very honored to have become a better friend of, and I hope to get to know Craig even better. In fact, I'm thinking of coming over to the Whole Life Expo, which is in early February. I don't know if you ever go to that.
I do sometimes, so just let me know because it's not too far. I'm definitely going to Alien Con.
Yes.
Yeah, in March 3rd, 4th, 5th.
Right. So for those of you who are following conferences, Alien Con, I think, is actually coming to the East Coast too. I think they actually have either a Philadelphia or a Baltimore stop. So let me tell people a little bit about Craig's background. Craig has actually been a casting director for about 3 decades in California. And in the Los Angeles area. I know, it's a long time. And he got into this business fresh out of high school. He was mentored by a number of people you may or may not know: Frank Herbert Dune and Dino and Rafaela De Laurentiis.
De
Laurentiis. I knew I'd pronounced that wrong. And also director David Lynch. All of them were very much involved in Craig's apprenticeship, and he actually also did a project for Steven Spielberg, where he was the casting director for a project called Amazing Stories. He also casted the popular Christmas movie called Prancer, which starred Sam Elliott. So Craig is an Emmy-nominated casting director for casting David E. Kelly's Picket Fences as well. Craig has a passion to write, and he's been writing stories that help get the reader to think deeply. He's very much interested in consciousness, and he's had some real curiosity and interest in the ET subject and how that relates to his own personal family and personal history, which he may share a bit with us tonight too. Craig has actually wrote and directed, this is how I first learned about Craig, a very short film called Stranger in the Pentagon, which was adapted from a popular book authored by the late Dr. Frank Stranges, who was a friend of Craig's and Craig knows. So after this production was finished, it started to collect some accolades as best sci-fi film at the Burbank International Film Festival. And it's won some other awards, the Remy Award at the World Fest at the Houston's International Film Festival for Best Sci-Fi Film or Best Sci-Fi Short. Craig has appeared on also many, many radio shows. So some of you may have heard of him on Coast to Coast with George Norrie. He's been a guest on the Open Minds talk show with Regina Meredith. He's done a couple of episodes on Beyond Belief, hosted by George Norrie. And if any of you have not muted yourself, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself because
Victor.
I'm going to ask Victor to mute himself, and I'm going to also mute Steve. So Craig is also the author of 4 sci-fi book series called The Autobiography of the Extraterrestrial Saga. And he's recently written a new book called UFO Hotspots, which features places all around the United States where famous UFO stories have appeared or happened, and what you can go see at those sites if you want to. And part of the reason I reconnected with Craig last year, actually almost a year and a half ago when he was writing this book, is I tried to provide him with any kind of information I could about the Travis Walton location. So that's included in this book. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Craig. And if you want to do a share screen, you're welcome to if you have any visuals for us. But if you just want to share and talk, that's fine.
I'll share and talk. I am not that savvy to do a share screen just yet.
That's fine. No worries at all.
I'm on a laptop that's a scissor laptop, and it's like so hard to figure things out when it's scissored. Otherwise, I'm looking down here because now when I'm scissored, it's up here. So anyway, but I'll hold up some visuals as we sort of go through. I just wanted to say when I started my casting career, it was on Amazing Stories as an associate. CD, not a full-time CD, but I got my feet wet on something like 30 plus episodes there, which was so much fun. I can't tell you. Are any of you guys Dune fans? Yes. Okay, good. So of course I worked on the 84 version for 4 years. I was one of the longest people on the shoot besides the producers and David Lynch as well. And so if any of you are interested, there is, I recently did the new documentary for the Dune 1984, which you can watch on arrow.com. It didn't make it into the 4K DVD collection because they wanted to go to press quicker than the documentarian had to get it there. So that's why it's on Arrow. It's really quite excellent. I'm in it a lot. And what they did with this documentary is they only wanted people who were behind the scenes, right, to tell the story from their perspective. They did take old interviews from David and Rafaela and that kind of thing. And also there's a writer named Max Every who is writing a whole book about Dune 1984. And so he's interviewed me along with lots of cast members. And guess what, folks? David Lynch finally broke his silence and got interviewed for the book. He won't talk about Dune because it was very upsetting to him. And so I was very happy to hear that David did it. And because David did it, Rafaela did it. So, and then
Craig, I'm going to ask you, for those who may not know what Dune is, can you give us a little bit of background since you brought it up?
Sure. Yeah, Dune is the Frank Herbert book that was released in 1984. And has been one of the biggest sci-fi classics. So many people tried to get it off the ground over the years. And even Roger Corman. I mean, I did a movie with his wife called The Silence of the Hams, which was hysterical, a spoof movie. And she said, "Oh, you have to meet Roger. You know, I'd love for you to come to our company and cast our films." So I was, and Roger, when I walked in his office, like had his head down and was like, "Yeah, you got 5 minutes." Right? But it was like his wife was forcing this meeting on him. I soon realized. So I said, I worked on Dune for 4 years. He perked up and he said, "Okay, you got 20 minutes." So, you know, he was very fun. Anyway, he at one point had the rights and was trying to get it done as well as many other people. Dino De Laurentiis, a lot of people don't know, is one of the biggest producers of all time because he by himself produced over 560 movies, like studio big giant movies. It's really unheard of, right? So you know, I worked with the De Laurentiis family on and off throughout the years, etc. So that's what Dune is, because the new Dune by Denis Villeneuve did so well. They're doing the sequel. They're shooting that right now to come out. So Dune Mania is happening all over again, and it's very exciting. So if you're a Dooney, as we, you know, call everybody, you can go watch that. Arrow, I think it's arrow.com. So anyway, I myself got into this sort of UFO business when I was 26. I had a major spiritual awakening, and that awakening made me think about what's out there in the universe. And so we didn't have an internet back then, but I would go to the Bodhi Tree bookstore and I would just buy everything in the UFO section. And I bought one of my prize books there a autographed copy of a book by Betty Hill, and because she had done a talk there that I had missed, and it was the last one on the shelf, so I was very happy. And soon after, she passed away. So anyway, so I would read as much as I could, and then if people who were connected to contactees or things like that, I would go and I would hear them speak. I would do whatever I could to absorb as much information as possible. I literally lived at the Bodhi tree. I just started reading all kinds of spiritual books. I started meeting people in the UFO community in MUFON. And so I started like kind of going on some of these expeditions with them, right? And Amy, can you, oh, there you go, you got it, sweet. And so I just started learning, and I started meeting contactees. I started hearing personal stories. I started seeing real photographs. One one case is a friend of mine, and I flew to the Midwest, where he took me along the Cape Fear River, where he was abducted. And his son, who was young at the time, and there were other people, they all went fishing. His son was stuck in, he was so terrified that he was back in bushes, just cowering. And there were three little creatures, like there were in this abduction, they were like, some were like just this big. And then they were all different sizes, going up to very tall. And so these some of these little creatures had the son cornered in fear for hours and hours, while the father actually was taken on board the craft. And then nobody else was home at their house at the time. So when he got back, it was dark. Of course, they were there in the daytime. And he grabbed his son. They jumped in the truck. Probably took them 5 minutes to get home. They pulled in the driveway. They could enter through the back of the house, right? And so what happened is then the minute they got home, the taller creatures were walking out of the forest, because their backyard was forest, towards them. They ran in the house. They locked all the door. And the son that this happened to was telling me in complete fear. Now the house was raised up, right? So when you look out the window, you look down, and if a being was tall, it's not going to actually hit where the window is, not even the bottom window sill, but it could be very close. And he said, Craig, they were like standing right there. We were like terrified, the whole thing. So he's taking me through his backyard and saying, this is where they were coming out. I had a Minolta camera, and I just kept snapping photographs, right? The next morning in the hotel, I said, well, let me look at the photos. I actually captured one of the creatures on film. I did. And it was in a perfect silhouette, like their legs end where our knees are, and then they have these long torsos, like a twice as long neck with a rounder head, right? And it was holding a light device like this, which I knew immediately was an interdimensional device. And then because it was all dark in silhouette because it was like at 5 o'clock when the sun was going down, we lightened the photo and we saw that it was wearing goggles. And I went, oh my God, those are interdimensional goggles. Like we have night vision goggles, of course, right? I mean, that's exactly what was going through my head. So that was interesting. And then he has 4 kids, and I just went with him and one of our other friends that night. And then the kids were like, because they abandoned that house like not long after. They like left all their crap in there, and they just went and they went onto a property that the wife's mother owned, and they've been there ever since. So so the kids said, you know, oh, come on, we want to take Craig back. We want to show him everything that happened. And I didn't want to go in the house because there was a lot of like dark stuff that started happening in the house. And then everyone's like, well, we're going in the house. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to stay outside knowing what, you know, in the dark. So I went in. But what was interesting is when we were going through the back again, one of the son's girlfriends was taking pictures, and she caught a creature that was very close to a mantis being. And we could hear rustling back in that little bit of forest. It is just, I have to tell you, it was, you know, very eye-opening and that kind of thing. I put that picture in the back of, I don't know if any of you have the book before this, the ET Species Almanac. I put that picture in the back of this book, the one that I took. And it's, you know, it's just fascinating to hear these stories. I mean, his story goes on more and more. It's not a part of the UFO Hotspot Compendium, but it is a part of the ET Species Almanac book. And also, I'm well over halfway through with the documentary to the ET Species Almanac. So we're actually having, it's an extension of the book. We're having the real live contactees. We're having people who claim to be hybrids, which they have very fascinating information as well, along with other people who are in the biz and that kind of thing. Not your usual suspects. I wanted to make this documentary completely different and unique from anything that's out there. So probably next summer or late summer is when it'll be released. So, but I'll talk a little bit about the UFO Hotspot Compendium right there. They put, isn't that funny? They put little Snake Girl, I call her Snake Girl from the, from the cover, right? They put her on the cover because they wanted people to sort of make the connection. So MUFON, both these books are from MUFON Books, by the way. And I think now there's 7 or 8 MUFON books in total, right? We know our dear friend Kathy Martin's got a couple of books. We did Captured with her friend Stanton Friedman. We know Paul Hynek did a book, and they redid some of his father's books to put them out there again. So I got a call from them, and they said, we would love for you to do, we have an idea for a book and we want you to write it. And it's, right now we're calling it the UFO Bucket List. It's a bucket list of places to go where either there are hordes of sightings where you could definitely see them, or where there are actual places that are cemented in history in ufology, right, for people to do. And then what you can do when you go to those places, and then have all of the information there. So for different things like George Adamski, for Travis, for Valiant Thor, for I forget the Socorro case, there's the actual coordinates to go to the actual spot with warnings, right? You know, like one is, of course, not Shag Harbor, it's the other one in Canada, Falcon Lake. That's like, you have to get a horse, and it's like 2 hours in to get to that spot. So, you know, some of these spots are going to be a little treacherous. Allagash is going to be a little treacherous to get to, unless you're an avid fisherman and really want to go out there and tough it out in the wild. So I said, well, how are we going to come up with these? And they had the head of MUFON send out to all the MUFON state directors to nominate all their favorite hotspots. And so then they brought them back to me, and I sort of coordinated them and said, okay, well, these we will do the larger stories on. Some of these, like when I talked to Jennifer, because there was so much new information with the Travis case, I decided to make that a longer extended story so people could really have all the facts in one place. And as Jen knows, I drove her crazy fact checking everything. I did that with everybody because I really wanted, uh, yes, we are noticing those colors, definitely. So, um, anyway, so I compiled all of those. I had a few of my own that I wanted to include that I have heard about for so long, but the very first one in the book is Giant Rock and the Integratron. Have any of you been there? If you have, yes, no, just I'm seeing Veronica, you've been there. It's an amazing place. I've heard about this place for so long, and I got a call, and Dr. Frank got a call, I think it was around 2005, from the sisters. Three sisters own the Integratron now, and from the Giant Rock historian Barbara Harris. They were going to restart the conventions that George Van Tassel used to do, the retro UFO conventions, and they asked Dr. Frank and I to speak. And so Dr. Frank and I drove out there one day. They closed the Integratron down, and we just sat with the sisters upstairs in the dome, just talking and talking and talking. And all of a sudden, Dr. Frank comes out and he says, well, when George used to give all of these, I emceed them. Now, I didn't even know that. So I got to hear a lot of the history straight from his mouth. There was a channeler named Bob Short who was there in the very beginning, where Dr. Frank was, well before Dr. Frank even was there, like in the early 50s when George was there. And then I have another friend named Athena who was there in the very beginning. So George really he knew the guy who was running the airport before, which is just a dry bed, landing thing for small airplanes. And George Van Tassel had worked for Howard Hughes, for Douglas Aircraft. And after the other man had passed away, he wanted to have a metaphysical experience out in the desert. And so he moved him and his wife, his kids there. It was already built under the rock, a big giant room. Most of the time they slept outside on cots because it was so hot in the desert. But so in these early times, all of a sudden he began channeling space beings, and he was the very first man to ever channel Ashtar, right? And my friend Athena was there when that happened, right? So she was there all the way up until his second wife called her and said, George just had a heart attack and died. And they went to the hospital, and they went and they, had a little time with the body and that kind of thing. So it wasn't long after these channelings with all these different beings. By the way, I have all those channelings, by the way, which are amazing. I put a few of them into the UFO Hotspot, right? Just because they're interesting and what they meant. And then one night in 53, he's on his cot, he just wakes up, And, his family members are outside too on cots. Don't forget, the dogs are not barking, but he sees a man approaching. And he said, that's really weird because none of my family woke up, none of the dogs were barking. So I went to greet the man. He said it wasn't strange that that people would arrive in the middle of the night, right? Either by car or by plane. But he went and as he got closer to the man, he said he was 5'6". He had short blonde hair. He was in a sort of silvery suit, and he introduced himself as Salganda, and that he was a Venusian, right? And so he saw his ship not far behind him, and he asked him if he wanted a tour of the ship, which he did. And he was in there for about 20 minutes. He met 2 to 3 other guys that kind of looked like him. They were all around 5'6" as well. And then he somehow was given the blueprints on how to build this machine called the Integratron, which would regenerate the cells, keep you looking young like they are. Salganda was over 700 years old, he told George, and that it was also sort of like a time travel machine as well, although I don't know how that was supposed to have worked. But I want you guys to sort of keep in your mind that this is happening in 53, and we have Valiant Thor coming in 57 with the same technology, right? That was turned away from our government at the end of his 3-year he was there for 3 years to help guide the president in the ways of the universe and lots of other things. So it wasn't the president that turned it down, it was the other powers that be, because they basically wanted his technology. But so going back, so George gets 20 grand from Howard Hughes to start to build this thing, and he has to figure out ways to raise money. So he starts the conventions, and within several years, there are 10,000 people out in the desert meeting contactees who are giving speeches, etc. Now, Bob Short, who was there, took videos of this. He has since passed on, and I actually bought off of him because he only sold bootleg ones, actual film of those conventions showing all the hordes of people and trailers, campers, cars. I mean, everything under the sun, right? And so at one of these conventions there at Giant Rock, that they had a sheriff there to keep the peace. And just after when lunch was going to begin, he had a Polaroid camera. He was taking pictures of the rock and all the people, and he sort of caught a gigantic ship in the background, humongous, with all of the I don't know how to say it, but when a ship has all the stuff that's going around it when it's sort of coming in, I don't want to say mist, but it's kind of like mist, right?
Paper.
And yeah, exactly. And he captures that. I have a picture of it in the book as well. And he said, with one snap of the camera, I became a believer. So we'll just fast forward and we'll just go to George has almost got the Integratron done after years and years of hard work. And he has a conversation with my friend Athena and her husband, and said, Salganda, it was about 5% away from being turned on. And he says, Salganda told me not to turn it on because the people weren't ready for it yet. And George also said that the military was watching him from a mountain across the way and all of that. So there was a lot of things at play. When he passed away, his wife sold it, I believe, to Emil Canning, and then it sort of sat dilapidated for many years until the sisters bought it, refurbished it. It's a beautiful place, so people can go there now. You have to make a reservation if you want to go and get a sound bath. If you have never had a sound bath, oh my God, you got to get a sound bath there, because it's in the resonation chamber above. And it's a sound chamber where sounds are thrown. I was there once when Gregorian chanters from Italy were there to record their album inside the dome, right, upstairs. And so they asked if they could come in and sing a song for us, or chant a song for us, which they did. And I have to tell you, it was the most amazing thing to hear that. So you do have to make a reservation, and they do give you a little explanation about the dome and that kind of thing. All of that information is in the book too. And then if you really want to learn about giant rock, you can actually hire the historian to take you out there. And I would suggest you go at night so you can sky watch, bring some chairs, your jackets, and she will tell you the whole history of giant rock that's there. Her name is Barbara Harris, and she's in the book as well, with all of her information. Now, so one of the hotspots that I have heard about, like the Integratron, for a very long time is a place called the Bradshaw Ranch. And it is, have you heard of it, Jen? Yeah, you have. Oh, good. Veronica.
It's actually in Arizona, is it not?
It is. It's in the Verde Valley, just outside of Sedona.
Yes, I have heard of it.
Yes.
It's off, it's private, it's off limits. You can't make a reservation.
No, you can't make a reservation, but I can tell you how you can definitely get there, right? So, I have a friend who was in Dr. Frank's group, and she lives in Sedona, and she used to work for Bob Bradshaw at the ranch. So she was always telling me these stories that happened at the ranch, which just fascinated me, and I really wanted to know more, right? So at a certain point, I was visiting Sedona, and I said to her, I said, will you take me out there? And she goes, yes. She said, we can get there in the car only to a certain point because you need a 4-wheel drive, but I know how to do it. And it was sort of like a 40-minute hike in. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If you guys are sensitives, and if you can feel spirit, if you can feel things in other dimensions, I've had it ever since I was a kid. I've been seeing stuff all the time. And as I was walking down the wash, which is the road, there's all kinds of shrubs and things there. I never in my life felt so many things looking in on me. The veils of the dimensions there are very thin, right? And everything in my body said, turn around and get out of there, get out of there, right? But I forged on, because I wasn't going to let my friend, who was then in her 70s, see me be afraid, right? So, she's like, oh, come on, come on. So anyway, so we got there. At that time, the government owned it. So there were lots of signs up that say no trespassing and that kind of thing. And she's like, come on, let's climb under the fence. And I said, no. I said, they got cameras. I said, the last thing we need is being seen on government cameras being on that property, right? So I saw it and I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. I would hate to be out here at night, right? So I am over the years, when I go to Sedona, I bought a local ufologist, a researcher named Tom Dongo. I have bought all his books on everything that goes on in Sedona. So I finally met him. We became friends. And he actually, when he married his second wife, Linda, Bob Bradshaw, um, she was having a lot of things happen on the ranch that were unexplainable. And so she called Tom Dongo. He came in, and for almost 4 years, at least once a week, they did research on the ranch. And I'm just going to give you a little laundry list of some of those things. And one is that Bob Bradshaw, now they built the ranch, which was a house that maybe had 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a little living room for them. Then what they did is, on the front of that, they built a saloon, right? Because Bob, when they would have tourists come out and they would put on rodeo shows, cowboys, Indians, all those things. They made lots of movies there, Elvis Presley movies, Joan Crawford movies. He was in almost every movie that shot there as a stuntman or as an actor. And so he built this saloon that had a bar where they could have a band and have music, and people could eat indoors as well and outdoors. So, so there was that. Now, right next door, a hop, skip, and a jump, is the oldest building or the oldest home in the Sedona area, which they call the Homestead House. These people had homesteaded this way, way, way beyond, right? So that house was still able, you could stay in it then. It wasn't really dilapidated. Now it's dilapidated, right? So one day Bob walks out into the front and a ship lands right in front of him, and he flips out. He turns around, he goes back in the house, and he just told his family, I want nothing to do with this stuff. I don't ever want to see it. I don't, his wife Linda and her son were really into it. So they worked with Tom Dongo a lot. So one night, the son with his girlfriend and the girlfriend's daughter are in the Homestead House, and late at night, he sees bright lights. He looks out the window and he sees a bunch of grays running around the property, and he is totally flipped out, and he has no idea what to do. His girlfriend wakes up, she's freaked out, the kid is freaked out. And so he's waiting till he doesn't see them, because all they want to do is get to the big house, right? And when the coast was clear, they ran into the big house, woke up Linda. She made coffee in the kitchen. They went in the living room. They're telling her the story, and a gray walks right by the front window, literally. And Linda has had no fear when it came to this stuff, because she wanted to know what it was. So she leaped up, opened the front door, and the thing vanished, right? Now, we know from other contact stories that some of them have things on their belts that if they touch, they'll go invisible, or they can wear a uniform that helps them go invisible. We don't really know how it is, but we kind of know from some of our own military stuff and the invisibility. So it would be very easy for advanced races to have that kind of technology. Now, another night, they hear their dogs barking crazily outside, and they go out and they are circled something that's invisible, looking up at it and barking like crazy. And Linda said that all she heard was the most heinous hissing that you ever heard, right? And it flipped her out so much that she got the dogs, I got them in the house, and the next morning they went out, and what they found were reptilian footprints. right? Also by their stables, which I would say is about a 10-minute walk from the ranch. Now, remember, he had like 140,000 acres. Like, he had a huge amount of land, right? So they found Bigfoot footprints around the horse corrals. And so Linda thought, well, I'm going to put a plate of food out and see what happens, right? So she put out fruits and vegetables, and she said the next morning they were gone, and that stones and sticks were left on the plate, which, as we now know, is Bigfoot gifting. They always gift back, right? And so she continually was feeding the Bigfoot. And she said that at that time, her mare was pregnant, and she kept finding white hairs on her mare's belly. And then Tom Dongo called her and said, really make sure that you keep an eye on your mare, because either grays or reptilians are stealing all the mare's babies on 2 other ranches so far near you, right? And so she decided that this Bigfoot was actually protecting her mare from this, right? And that at a certain point, she was drawing things in the dirt for her. The Bigfoot was drawing things in the dirt for Linda. And one time she laid on her side to show her that she was pregnant. And that after a while, there were Bigfoot footprints and little foot prints, however you say that. But she knew she was an albino because when you sometimes, like back then, they just had regular cameras and the old VHS cameras. Remember when you stuck the big tape in? And when her son would look through the viewfinder, they would be looking into other dimensions. So one time they saw her. She was a very tall albino Bigfoot, and above her was a silver saucer, right? And another time in another dimension, there was a real dinosaur walking around, right? Another time they saw telephone poles where there are no telephone poles, right? So there's all of this phenomena. I talked to a psychic, and I was telling them the story, and they said, this is a place that it's like the vortex is clockwise and counterclockwise, and that's why there's so much stuff on it, because they have a tree that's between the ranch house and the alligator house, which I actually photographed myself and put in the book. And Linda said that was a portal. And she said, when I felt the negative ones come through, she said, things always were negative on the ranch. And then I would feel angelic presences come through and that kind of thing. Now, they also would just snap pictures just to see. Tom was snapping pictures one night. It was just a small group of them, and another man's face showed up on his camera who was not there in the group. He allowed me to reprint the guy here. And on that same night, you know, when you are holding your camera and sometimes you click it and you take a picture of the ground, right? Well, that happened to Tom, and along one side guy's leg is a very small ship. It's all light blue, and it looks like a, you know, when you play jacks, it looks like that with all of the little protrusions coming out. So they also caught that. There is so much more that even goes on there, like people have missing time at the windmill, all of that. So it's a very interesting place. So if you guys really want to go there, in the book, Melinda Leslie, some of you may know her, she gives tours. Melinda will take you out to the ranch, right? She has about 5 or 6 pair of night vision binoculars, so you don't need to bring your own. She will also take you sky watching to this great place where I've gone with her before, just to look. And she's got a laser pointer where she can show you where some of them are, and everyone has their own so they can see. Now, it is not owned by the government anymore. The trespassing signs are off. So it's now sort of owned by, I think, a university who has taken a little part of the ranch on the other side of the homestead to see vegetation and how those things kind of grow, right? So interestingly enough, our friend Jen, Ron James, recently set up, I think, God, he set up a bunch of trail cams all over the ranch, and he left them up for 3 months. And he told me, he said, Craig, I didn't get one single thing, but I also didn't get one single animal. Animals know to stay away from that place. And he said, the only thing I got was a pixelated energy that moved and it went behind some trees, right? But when he came back, he had bought a brand new truck, and there was strange mark. Now, all the dirt there is red. There were strange things like this on his car, as if somebody took their hands and made these things with a white clay, not red clay, right? So, you know, even when Linda and her son and Bob were living on the ranch, one night their trucks parked outside, they heard all of this noise, and they went out there, and the one truck was being squeezed like a tin can. It was encaving, and they started taking pictures, and they actually got this blue and strange white light around it, right? That was happening. And, you know, I mean, I've talked to Tom about this a lot. I was like, do you think, like, because we know there's lots of bases in Sedona that are military / ET bases, you know, you wonder, were they trying to get them, scare them off the property because they wanted that property, because, you know, maybe part of that base is there? We don't know any of those things, but Tom knows like all of that stuff. I love catching up with him when I go there, just to hear what's going on in and around Sedona. So if you want to go and you want to be brave and go at night, tell me about it. So
A couple of us just did a sky watch with Melinda Leslie.
oh, you did?
Yes,
Great.
we were in Lachlan, Nevada for Paula Harris's
Yes.
Star Works conference. I was one of the speakers there. So Melinda took us out, and we did a interesting program. There's another very lovely gentleman there, a pilot named Don. Blanking on Don's last name right now, but he's written a UFO book, and he's a pilot, and he's worked with Stephen Greer. So he did sort of an initiation of vectoring, and we had some unusual stuff show up in the sky.
Yeah, yeah. It's really putting your intention out there.
Right.
If you really need to sort of do a meditation, you need to call upon it, and then it's getting yourself in a happy vibration. Like one place that's not in here was a woman's house in Scottsdale. She has 18 different extraterrestrial vortices on her property. She has a very large backyard. And when you meet her, she's a healer. She's an amazing healer. And to hear her talk and go through all of this kind of stuff. But once we went in her backyard, and I saw craft up in the sky, right? And I said, okay, I'm going to ask you guys to shoot some blue beams down here on the property right in front of her workshop house in her backyard. And I just kept snapping, And they did. They were shooting blue beams down, right? I mean, it's amazing. She's had contact forever, right? And she's amazing in herself. But I think you know, two of the places that we know you're going to see, well, several places you're going to definitely see a lot of UFOs is Sedona, for sure, especially through night vision. I see them through night vision all the time when I go there. Definitely ESETI Ranch, right? ESETI is like the galactic park, right? You also have to make you can just make a reservation and go sky watching there. ECETI.org, I believe. All that's in the book too. And the long story short is, way back in the 50s, Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 disc-shaped saucers, and he reported it. And it was between Mount Adams and I forget the other mountain. But that's where the term flying saucer was coined. So when you are at ESETI Ranch and you're in the Skywatch area, you see a giant field that goes on for, I don't know if it's like 2 miles, 3. And then at the end of that is Mount Adams, just sitting there in all her majesty, like so beautiful. So the thing is that the people that work there and live there and other people have seen craft going in and out of the mountain constantly. And they say that there is a benevolent Pleiadian base underground along with other star nations there. And that also, when you're sitting in the Skywatch area at night, you start to see all these weird lights just flashing all over the mountain. They're not in any particular order. Some are brighter, some are not. And I originally thought, well, maybe it's people walking with flashlights, and people were saying, no, it's not that. It's some kind of phenomena that happens, but that also happens in the Marfa lights, and it also happens at Skinwalker Ranch on top of their mesa. Nobody knows what those lights are. They just seem to flash for some kind of reason, which nobody has come up with an antidote or an answer to that, right? But when you're there, they have the one, like one of the ranch hands will have one pair of night vision binoculars, and everybody has to share them. And when they see something, sometimes you can see it with the naked eye. Sometimes there's a horde of them, there's a fleet of them. Sometimes there's 1 or 2, and they'll send up the laser pointer just like Melinda does. And then you can see it, and they'll actually interact with it and have it move back and forth, up and down, power up its lights. It gets all exciting, and people go crazy, and they love that kind of thing. So you can also stay there on the ranch. You can bring your camper, you could do all different kinds of things. You just have to see how you do that on their website. You can rent a room in one of the houses, you can rent a yurt, all different kinds of things there. The only thing is I kind of like the comforts of home. It's a community bathroom, so you have to leave and go outside and go to the community bathroom. So I also put a little thing in there. Right near there's a great place called the Cozy Cabins, and it was cheap and cheerful, and it was very clean, and it literally was 5 minutes away from ESETI Ranch. So you'll want to definitely do that. And I think they only have like maybe 6, 7, or 8 cabins. But yeah, so you're gonna, that way you'll have your own bathroom and kitchen and that kind of thing. So so those are some of my favorite ones. Of course, I think, some of the ones that go way far back that I also found interesting that I've known about a lot is the Aurora alien, right? Which goes back in, it happened on April 17th, 1897. So can you imagine all over Texas and the US, these oval shaped silver ships are being spotted? And if you can imagine with a mindset of that era, what were people thinking it was? Were they actually thinking it could be aliens from another world? What was really going through their mind, right? I mean, we have no idea. And then suddenly at 6 a.m. one morning, one of these things, now remember, everyone's up, they're on their farms, working their farms early in the morning, so they're outside. And they see one of these things coming flying down. It goes through the town square. It hits Judge Proctor's water tower, and everything goes spraying in all directions. And Judge Proctor was not home that weekend. So everyone from the neighboring farms started rushing over. And what they found is they found this being very thin in a silver bodysuit, like, you know, right hugged up against its body. They actually thought it was its skin at first. That had lizard-like skin, and it was bleeding black blood. And so one of the stories, now back then, what we have is we have real life stories that were put in the papers, because they would come and they would report, and there was nobody to tell them any different about what to say. There was no censorship back then. So we have these real stories. So one story was that he was already dead, and another story was as they moved him into the barn, tried to help him, and he passed away. But what we do know is that all the stories said they gave him a good Christian burial. I can imagine, can you imagine the pastor giving that eulogy? I would love to have heard what he said. And then they buried him in the cemetery, right? And they had a headstone, and they actually carved his ship with the 3 windows in it. It had like 3 little ports. And I think it was, you know, it wasn't until maybe the 70s or whenever, and I'm not sure if it was Jim Mars who brought back a lot of the story. I knew Jim as well, and he, if you guys are really interested in it, he did do a documentary. It's free to watch on Amazon Prime if you want to see it. And he went in with a lot. We also had Bill Burns. He went out there when he did UFO Hunters, and they did the ground penetrating radar. And what they found was that something was there, but it was concave. So they weren't sure if it was a body, what it was, but it was also said, because people were coming to try and dig them up, is that they had already moved the body somewhere else to a safe location, right? So at a certain point, the one gravestone just disintegrated. So people got together, they made a new one, put it there, and then of course somebody came and stole it. So now it's just a rock, and people leave all kinds of trinkets for the Aurora alien. And there actually is a guy there in town that you can contact who will, you know, give you a little tour of the things to do around town and take you there and tell you all about the Aurora alien on that as well. And at the end of, you know, these chapters as well, like I worked with Carrie Trent, who wrote a whole book with all of the latest information. So if you're interested, you can always go and buy these people's books and read more about the story if it intrigues you. So I find that you know, I like that. I like having the sources right at the end of each chapter. They're at your fingertips, and you guys can like saying, okay, yeah, I'll get that. That sounds fun, right? So, and I would say, are any of you guys from Canada? Anybody from Canada? No. Well, the I will say, I'll tell you a little bit about the Shag Harper incident, because I work with Chris Stiles, who is a former MUFON investigator, terrific guy. I worked with him just like I did with you, Jen. And this happened way back when. They even have in St. Paul a UFO landing pad, right? That is dedicated, inviting people from other worlds to come and visit them. And at the dedication was Paul Hellyer way back in the day. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah,
Is
really
this
cool.
in is Shag Harbor near New Brunswick?
I'm not sure
Or
where it's
Newfoundland? And I'm
near.
trying to remember exactly where it is, but it's northeastern Canada.
I think so. I'm not exactly sure.
It's Nova
Ex-
Scotia.
Nova
Thank you,
Scotia.
Nova
There we
Scotia. Thank
go.
you.
Thank you. Very good. Good. So, so the basic of that story is there's a 18-year-old guy named Lori with his girlfriend and a few other friends. They see something falling from the sky. They think it's a plane that's about to crash about 200 to 300 yards out in the water. And once it did, they immediately called the mounted police. They came out, and what they were all worried about was, were there any survivors? So they immediately got a boat, one of the police officers, and they got some other fishermen who were also rescue teams to get in a boat and go out there. And all that they could see were these sort of illuminated balls of orangey yellow light floating on the surface. And as they got out there closer and closer, they could see that there was a giant area filled with yellow foam, right? And when they got really close, those orbs just descended below the water and out of sight. And so they were really frantic looking for survivors. They didn't find any wreckage. They didn't find anything. And the thing that I wanted to know was, I called Chris and I said, nothing is ever said about, did anybody get a sample of the foam? What was the foam, right? And he said, no. He said, actually, when they took their nets and tried to scoop it up, it went right through the net. They couldn't get it because of, the boats were up higher, that kind of thing. So nothing was ever considered with the foam. So when Chris and his partner, they went back in the mid 90s and reopened that case, they found a lot of really interesting things that were, they found that the actual craft had went underwater and sort of stayed by shellborne, right? And their navy was, they put their ships up above it and they waited a week, and then they decided, well, we're going to go down there and see what it is. And then all of a sudden a sister ship came underwater as if it was assisting that ship. And then they observed it for a week. And then all of a sudden both ships went away and they saw them coming up and out of the water in Maine and went up into the sky and wherever they were going. So it obviously was not something that was from here, although it was thought that maybe it could have been, right? But I think, what's interesting, that Chris said the US Navy flew a high altitude photo reconnaissance mission in the Shag Harbor area. NORAD launched a 35-minute strategic air command operation over the crash site that was noted in APRO's preliminary report. Barrington Baccaro and CFS Shelbourne, the two nearest NORAD bases, drew half of their staff from US military personnel, right? So I just found that, it's so interesting to hear. If you go deeper and you dig a little deeper and you kind of find these things out, you can, find a little more. People will tend to talk, give a little bit more information.
Yeah, something was definitely going on.
Yes, definitely.
Why else
Definitely.
would NORAD have been involved?
Right.
I have
Exactly.
heard Chris speak about this, and he does an excellent job of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe we'll
Yeah.
have him on as a whole program to just talk about the whole incident at Shag Harbor.
That would be, you
But
should.
a lot of people do not know about it, and the locals actually thought it was an airliner that had gone down.
Yeah.
They didn't realize what it was, but they could see lights in the water, and they were afraid it was an airliner that was sinking.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And, there are some frightening places. There's some forbidden places that you never want to go to. Well, we all know you can't go to Area 51, but guess what? You can take a tour. There's a place that will actually give you a tour and take you out for the day. They give a wonderful tour. They take you down the extraterrestrial highway to the little alien and as far as you can go, and, to Area 51. And they feed you lunch and do all of that. And that goes out of Las Vegas. So that part is fun. There's, I'm sure everyone's heard of the Stardust Ranch. There's a lot of controversy over that one.
Where is the Stardust Ranch?
It's in Arizona, I believe. I think it's Arizona or let's see. Oh, I think I have it here. Oh, that's still there.
Yeah, I don't know it. I'll have to Google it.
Oh, yeah. Well, just trying to think of, hang on. I think we're getting there.
Well, while you're looking, I will mention that there is a book called From Outer Space to You, written about Howard Menninger. In fact, I'm not sure if I think Howard Menninger actually wrote that book. Is that correct?
He did. Howard Menger.
Menger, I'm pronouncing it.
Yes, and
He had many contact experiences in the early days, just like the guy involved in the Integratron, George Van Tassel. So this was
Yes.
early in the 50s. And there was not that much stigmatism in the early days about this subject. So he was on some mainstream radio shows. He was apparently having contact. He would know, sort of like Billy Meyer, when he was going to have contact, and he would go out. And this all took place in High Bridge, New Jersey, in
Yes.
central northern New Jersey. So a group of friends of mine that I'm familiar with are planning on actually doing a conference around the Howard Menger contact and the house that he lived in, where this took place. They're going to take people around on a little tour and, sort of bring back the awareness that the interesting thing about this story, of course, as you well know, Craig, is that Val Thor apparently came to his gathering at his place. He had conferences at his house, little mini conferences with smaller groups of people, like, 20, 30, 40 people would show up. But apparently Val Thor showed up and was photographed.
And we know that was intentional, because those August Roberts, who was a retired Air Force photographer and a amateur ufologist, at that time had the world's largest collection of UFO photographs. He was also good friends with Dr. Frank Stranges, who was living in New Jersey at the time. And after he took the photographs of Valiant Thor that day, he did them in his lab. He called Dr. Frank, went to Dr. Frank house the next day, showed him the pictures, told him the stories. And Dr. Frank then made a large Valiant Thor photo. And when he would give his talks, he would tell the story of August Roberts. And he is in December of 1959, he is now speaking at a church for 2 weeks. And he has the picture up there. And on that particular night, he talked about UFOs and the Bible. And he would talk about Adamski. He would talk about Valiant Thor, although he didn't know his name then, right? But he would tell the story about what happened from August Roberts. And then on that same night, a woman afterwards comes up to him, shows him her Pentagon badge, and she points to Valiant Thor's picture and she says, he wants to meet with you. And that's how it began. Now, was it, here's the things that I ask, because I'm a huge expert on the whole Valiant Thor story since I knew Dr. Frank for so many years and know a lot about it that people don't know, is that I believe that it was a calculated measure on Valiant Thor's part to go to that, to also get connected to Dr. Frank, but also to let the world know that he existed and that he was here to help humanity, because Dr. Frank then started a grassroots campaign that went out throughout all of the years, right? So Dr. Frank met the crew on his ship for the first time in 1967. And there are just like many, many wonderful stories about them and all the things that they do. I mean, we could do a whole seminar on just that subject matter, but I think that's a great thing. Dr. Frank also connected me to Connie Menger. Howard was alive, but he was in Alzheimer's at the time. So I spoke to Connie on several occasions. Jim Moseley was there that day that Valiant Thor was there. I had several conversations with Jim Moseley, who was an absolute non-believer in UFOs and extraterrestrial beings. And I'd laugh and I'd say, Jim, you were there. He's like, I don't remember. You know, he was a young guy. And also Gray Barker was there. He's actually in those photographs, right? So anyway, now all of those Gray Barker books, ever since I came out with the short film, are now suddenly authored by Valiant Thor. So yeah, all of a sudden there's about 20 books on Amazon authored by Valiant Thor, which are old Gray Barker, old Saucerian books. So anyway, he never wrote a book, just so everyone knows. He never wrote a book and left it here on Earth. So
can I ask you a question? Do you think that Val Thor is still here? Apparently he spent time at that's who the stranger in the Pentagon was. He spent time with our government. Yes. Do you want to, I don't think many people know the details of this, and it's really quite fascinating. If you'd be willing to share that, then I think what we should do is open it up to Q&A after that, if people want to ask questions. But apparently Val, you know, had some connection with the Pentagon, right?
Yes, it was brought to them many years before he showed up that a universal emissary was going to come and help groom the president, right? They didn't know when it was, and Valiant Thor didn't know when it was, Dr. Frank said, either. And that he had been coming here on Earth many times before his official capacity began. Right. So once he said that to Valiant Thor, it seemed like a lifetime that it took before he was actually said, okay, it's a go. So he came on March 16th, 8 a.m. in the morning in an agricultural field in Virginia. They brought him directly to the Pentagon. He was briefed there. He was put on the underground train and taken directly over to meet President Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, and some of the other powers that be. It's really interesting. You know, Dr. Frank was friends with a lot of those old generals, and I met a lot of them, and they told me what it all looked like beneath, where the trains were, where how everything worked below down there as well. Our friend, as you know, Major George Filer, actually was there during the time that he was there. And George told me he was walking down one of the corridors one day, and one of the guys said, the extraterrestrial works in there. You know, so George had heard about him. And here is the coolest bit of information, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the story, is George was on an airplane in those early days, and sitting next to him was Michael Rennie, who played Klaatu in The Day the Earth Stood Still, right? And Michael Rennie told him that the US government funded that movie, right? There's another filmmaker, by the way, who recently went through all of the documents that were released by the government, and he found over 2,500 cases where the government funded and also reworked scripts to make the military and things, or whatever their agenda was. So we know this to be true, that they do this, right? And so I started thinking, well, Day the Earth Stood Still came out in like 52. When did these people come to tell the government that he was coming? Was it prior to 52? And if it was, did they decide to make this movie about a human male coming to Earth to find out what the public's reaction to that would be, right? I mean, it's all food for thought, right? We can't confirm or deny, but I will tell you in a very few words that over the past few years, I found my biological father, who's dead, but my biological father was in Project Blue Book and was in the Air Force. And all I found his brother, who I'm very close to, and his 3 sons, and all I hear everything from them, but they said he was very tight-mouthed and he would never talk about those things. But he was there during the time of Valiant Thor and that kind of thing. He was stationed all around and that kind of thing. So what we believe him to have been was maybe a paper pusher for a general, because my uncle said he was a very fast typist. So I'm always on the lookout, like with John Greenwald and everybody else, to see if every once in a while, like when I was especially doing Socorro, I had all the Blue Book files, right? Looking for his name or first initial and last name, which I think is fascinating. So, but basically Valiant Thor came with a design to help humanity, to how to prolong life, how to stay forever, in the Fountain of Youth, just like Salganda did with George Van Tassel. And but came with a lot of other things, especially about atomics and how they harm not only our world, but other worlds, interdimensional worlds, going on with things like that, going over all kinds of things. He actually helped them in the infancy of NASA. He helped the US there. Now, it is still said, because he is still here, that he still guides NASA today, right? And there's a lot more to that story that I can't talk about publicly, but it's in our favor, right? It's in our favor. It's a good thing. So a lot of people think it's a bad thing, right? They go to the dark place, but it's not. It's a good thing. Anyway, after 3 years, Eisenhower and Nixon really were for this design, because they would implement it in America, and when proven successful, then release it to the rest of the world, right? And but it was all the other powers that be were the ones that vetoed it. So Eisenhower had to tell Valiant Thor that they turned it down, etc. So Valiant Thor left exactly 3 years to the date, back on March 16th. And he went away for a year. And then he came back, and he has been here ever since. He is here to shepherd the earth into cosmic life, back into universal living, bringing us out of duality into being fully conscious cosmic beings, sovereign beings, and helping to get us out of this muck and mire that we're all stuck in, right? And a lot of this is done, as you know, through consciousness raising programs, starseed programs, all different kinds of programs that are going on. So he's here for the long duration. I would put him in the classification of a high seraphim, because he is very well regarded and really well respected. I've met many people that have met him, and of course, Dr. Frank. I have met him on the inner, where he does come to me in dreams. Every once in a while, it's not a whole lot, but when I was writing and I was doing the short film, I mean, I was having a lot of problems at the end, and I felt him come, and he was like, "What do you need?" And I said, you know, it's really strange, because when he comes, it's a whole energy where you just want to cry for 15 minutes because it's so beautiful. My agent, my literary agent, I'm telling her the story, and tears are coming down her face. And I'm like, "Oh, you get it. You connected into him." And she's like, "Yeah." She was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." And I said, "Yeah, it's amazing." So he's here for, you know, our ascension transition, and all of that. And I think it's, you know, it's one of the greatest stories. And there's the people I have met, 1, 2, 3, 4 people that have met him face to face, right? Other people have interdimensional or go up astrally on ships and have that kind of experience as well. And but I just think it's really one of the most amazing stories. I'm gearing, you know, we're really trying to get the financing together so I can make the feature film, which will blow everybody's minds. It's going to be so cool. So if anybody knows millionaires or billionaires, send them my way.
That would be really wonderful. Well, you seem to have a lot of Hollywood contacts yourself.
I do, but it's a expensive
Financing
movie
is
to
different.
make, and financing is different, because I cannot go a studio route, because the studio will tell me what to do, and they'll make him into Captain America, and it will no longer be a spiritual piece. And I promised Dr. Frank and him that I wouldn't sell out. And I've already turned 3 places down because they wanted to turn it into their own story. And I said, you can't, like, what? I mean, nobody's going to go see it. People will be pissed that you're not doing the rightful story and the spiritual story behind it. So,
Right.
mhm.
Right. Well, this is probably a good place to invite people who might want to have questions
Yes.
to ask you, certainly since you brought up the topic of Valiant Thor. So I'm going to invite people, if you have a question, you want to chat with Craig, please either, put your hand up through Zoom or just wave and I'll see you. I'll start
Wave.
looking. I'll put
That's
myself
right.
on view so I can see everyone, the gallery view, so I can see you all. So Carol Rahill has one. So unmute yourself,
Beautiful.
Carol, and go ahead. Just, do you know how to unmute yourself?
Yeah, he did right
Yeah.
there.
Dick Rahill. I was wondering about the Shag Harbor date, that event, because I remember it clearly.
Yes, it is. Let me tell you right now. October 4th, 1967.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I followed that with great interest.
Yes, it's an amazing story. It's an amazing story.
You have been fantastic.
Thank you, Dick.
Loved
Carol.
every minute of it.
Thank you.
And you got a hell of a memory.
I know, right? I do. I have so much information in my brain from actors, the film industry, and UFOs, right? And people always say, I mean, don't people like think you're weird in the film business because you're into UFOs? I said, no, they actually tell me their own UFO stories, or they saw an alien, or they, they saw something. And it was, just out of the ordinary. And some of the stories are like, oh my God. I mean, I would never have thought of them. Never, but I did get to go and meet Connie Menger. I flew down to Vero Beach and I got to meet her son, who's a naval officer, and her daughter, who's a teacher. They allowed me to come. They've never allowed anyone else to come from the UFO community. They said no, but for some reason they said yes. And I got to sit with her. She was 95 years old. Her hair was all the way down her back. She looked gorgeous. She looked like, she was maybe 70, and a really good 70, hardly had a line on her face. And she said, it's good eating. I've been a vegetarian my whole life and all of that. And they are an amazing story. Howard Menger met with beings from all of the different planets in our galaxy, I would say, because it's explained that all of the worlds, they live on the inside of their world. So they can terrace out floors. They have things called synchrotron skies. So if you can look up, it's infinite. A synchrotron sky goes from day to night, like the outside of the planet. Some floors are light, some floors are day, some are this. But see, here, they can keep the resonation fields that they need to stay young and healthy in these environments on the interior of worlds and inside their craft. If they're going to be away for a long period of time, they also have it built into their suits if they wear their suits. Yeah.
Okay.
You have a question, Veronica?
You're muted. You're
Yeah,
muted.
she's undoing it.
Well, it's so fantastic. Thank you so much. I've had such a fascination because my aunt, who was a spiritualist in the 50s, used to tell me about, these UFO things. And of course, she was having experiences, but
yes,
I'm trying to wrap my head around how Menger actually attracted Val Thor. I'm kind of ignorant about his history.
he was already having many contacts with beings throughout the galaxy, all human. Him and his wife Rose, he was married to Rose when the pictures of Valiant Thor were taken, and Rose is sitting next to him. You can see that. And it wasn't long after that that Howard left his wife and then married Connie, right? And so it's very fascinating because you say, well, how did they know that that was Valiant Thor? How did they know? Well, we have a book that was being written by August Roberts that was going to be done by Saucerian Press that never got published. So I actually have that transcript and I have his notes, and actually how Howard knew that they were not from here is they gave him a certain handshake.
Oh.
And then he would know that they were a visitor. And Valiant Thor and Dawn and Jill did give him that handshake. And Augie was so excited, like he knew Valiant Thor was not from here. He just knew it inside of him. Dr. Frank told me these stories. He said he was so annoying that that it even turned Val off a little bit, right? Because he wouldn't stop taking pictures. He took over 250 pictures that day, and what we have on the internet is all that's left. Nobody knows. I've tried to find out where his collection went. It could have just gotten thrown away. We don't know. I mean, we don't have a full-on face of Valiant Thor. We only have side views. We have one where he's smiling, but it's like this much in a picture and the rest is cut off. And but the minute when it was over and Valiant Thor and them were gone, he rushed to Howard and he said, they're visitors, aren't they? Did they give you the handshake? And he said, yes, they are visitors, right? So so there were many of those kind of visitors that went there, and it was said that they would, Howard and maybe both his wives, I'm not sure if it was one or the other, they would help them, they would go and buy them earth clothes, right? So that they could experience, and that there was lots of fun things with the space women putting on a bra or wearing high heels because they couldn't walk in the high heels. And in their world, there is no gravity that's, gonna make them droopy. So, but they evidently they got a kick out of, those little things. So, but yeah, what a great sense of history there. High Bridge, New Jersey was quite the hotspot back in the day. I don't even know who lives on the farm there, but that would be interesting. You have to let me know about that, Jen.
Yes, they're talking about doing it in June.
In
Sometime
June.
in the middle to the end of June is what they're.
Oh, great.
I used to fly into just a farm field. High Bridge, New Jersey. It's South Jersey.
Oh, that's nice.
Far from the coast.
Who's going to put it on?
Well, Joe Foster is currently talking about it with Frank Chili.
My turn to
Oh, great. Oh, that would be awesome.
And also some other people. Bruce Pearson is in the area. He might be willing to do it. And it's the town of Highview, is that what it's called? High Bridge. Literally the town council of High Bridge is interested.
Tiny little town.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute Carl. The whole group, the whole town there is looking at potentially being involved in this little conference. So I don't know if it will happen, but I've started to get emails about it. And if I can help in any way, I told them I would be happy to. So I might
Well,
be
I think
bringing
it's
them
great.
the
I
AV
think it's good.
equipment.
Yeah, I think it would be really good because, you know, towns like Socorro and other towns are now, look what Roswell did to their town, right?
McMinnville, Oregon,
Yeah, exactly,
Trent
exactly.
Case,
Yes,
many,
all
many
of that.
small towns are
Yeah.
getting on the bandwagon. I was hoping to try to get Snowflake or Holbrook or Heber to do this for the Travis case, but I could not get the town interested. The town
Wow.
councils were not really wanting to be supportive.
Well, that's too bad, but there's, I mean, there's lots to do when you go to Heber and you go to those things
Yes,
that you told me about that we put in the book. So
that's
that's fascinating. And that the phone booth is still around behind
Yes.
Casa Roma, right?
right behind the restaurant Casa Roma.
Yeah,
So you can go
yeah.
take your pictures there in the phone booth. And a
In
lot
the
of
phone
people
booth.
do and post them on Facebook. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people doing that now,
Exactly.
maybe because of your book.
I've had lots of people holding it up saying, well, I'm going to do every single one of these and post it. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, but of course,
So-
going to the site where Travis's site happened, it's very hard to find because it's way up high on the Mogollon Rim. And
It
it's
is.
a 45-minute walk from the closest, place where you can park or pull off your car off the Rim Road and park. So it's
That's
not an
right.
easy place to find.
It isn't. No.
Yeah.
No.
So
But
does anyone else, do you have some more questions? I will unmute you,
Mhm.
Carl. Go, oh, let's leave.
Dick, that's Dick.
Ask to unmute. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, that's Dick. Carol will unmute him.
Oh, right, that's Dick. Dick, you have to unmute yourself again. Can he do it? Let's see. I'll see if I,
Carol's gonna do it.
okay.
There you go.
Okay.
You got it.
Snowflake was a tiny town when Travis was there. And now it's 8,500 or something. Has that just exploded? The town
Well,
of Snowflake,
yes,
Arizona,
all
where
those,
Travis lived.
yes, all those towns have traffic lights now and, they've gotten much bigger. So
I
yes,
think it was only a couple of hundred people, wasn't it? in
That's right.
Travis's day.
yes, yes, in the early 70s. Yeah, or
He
well,
is one fascinating guy. And I got to sit next to him at the diner and talk to him for an hour and a half.
we had him come and we screened the film and we did Q&A with him in Pennsylvania when I was
Ah.
running the MUFON programs in person. And we would all go out to a diner, just like all the UFO groups do after the meeting
Yes.
closes. So
Yeah, that's
great,
the
Dick.
fun. I love doing that.
yeah,
That's
that's where the
really-
real information happens, right?
Yes,
At the
absolutely.
diner
I'll
after,
say.
or at the
Absolutely.
bar.
Yeah,
Something.
exactly.
You'll have to come out and go to the diner with us.
I would love to go to the diner with you
Well,
guys.
if we do the conference in Highbridge, maybe Craig will be a speaker, or maybe
I
he
would
like to come in.
absolutely love to be a speaker. I can do the whole thing on Valiant Thor and all that good stuff. So
That would be
Looking
really-
forward to meeting you.
yes, I would love that.
yeah.
I would love that.
So
I'm
does
90
anyone
years old, so I don't have a whole lot of time unless I hook up with your people. Okay.
Victor, do
I
you
love
have a
it.
question? Do I see you, Victor, raising your hand? Do you?
He's like, no, not me. Okay, Veronica, you have another one?
I have a question. Hi. I'm wondering now, with all the attention given to the recent sightings and what the
Yeah.
government is finally coming forward with disclosure, what's your take on how long it's really going to take for the government to disclose this long UFO history?
Well, I think as we all know, when all of the people from To the Stars left their positions and formed To the Stars, that this was the government's way of doing a soft disclosure, right? It's obvious, right? It's really obvious that that's what it was. And then they released the Tic Tac video. And I think what they'll do is they'll release things a little bit at a time and sort of just get the population ready for it and that kind of thing. But I think there will just come a day where either one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to say it, right? They're either going to say it, or they're going to be forced to say it, because everyone has a phone and everyone is capturing stuff all the time. I have actors, agents, friends looking to the skies and getting UFOs on camera in really good pictures. Like an agent got a silver donut shaped craft up in the skies in Hollywood, right? Another one got a triangle over Studio City out here in the early evening hours. So all of these things are there, and more, like, where did all of the TV shows go this past season? They all went to extraterrestrials. Did you notice that? UFO Witness, I was on 7 of the 8 episodes talking about ETs. I'll be on, if any of you have Gaia, I'll be on their new season of Deep Space talking about ETs. I'll be on the new season of Ancient Aliens talking about UFO hotspots. It is now becoming such a huge worldwide phenomenon that people really just want to know more about it, right? And the average people who know nothing about it either go in the I believe it category or I don't believe it category, because they really, as we all know, once you get deep dive and you start to talk to people, you start seeing things yourself. Like myself, you photograph an extraterrestrial, you photograph spirits, you photograph things like that, that it tends to, it makes you a believer, and you understand a lot more about what's going on. And then talking with other MUFON people or other researchers, you just try and piece it together. And we have these open discussion forums like this where we can talk about it and try and figure it all out ourselves. Doesn't mean we're going to come up with whatever that definitive answer is. But I will tell you that I once met with somebody very high up, and they said, it's pretty different being awake, isn't it?
What did he say?
It's pretty different being awake, isn't it?
Awake. Pretty different being awake.
Awake.
Very different.
Yes. And said, the strangest things that you can conjure in your mind, we have seen things 10 times stranger than that, right? So now we know we have these weird jellyfish things floating up in the skies, black and white. Some are pure black, some are white. We have these other blobular things now going through the skies. Nobody knows what those are. A lot of the snake ones that look like a snake thing, those are a time-space continuum. So they actually create this astrally where they are, and they go through the tube, and then the tube comes here in their destination point, and they come through it, and then eventually it just dissipates. So sometimes you will catch them in the skies. So those are very fascinating as well. So there's just so much.
Go
One
ahead.
more question.
Yeah.
How many places are people visiting the world from in your reckoning? How many different places?
In the ET Almanac book, I included 82 races because I had to stay under 300 pages per the publisher. And I decided to use a number of 82 because Paul Hellyer said that he knew of 82 races visiting Earth. So I thought I would honor him. Now, I had well over to about 125, and I elected to use the ones that are in the book and didn't go to those other ones just yet. But the Octurian, the Alpha Centaurians, through one of their contacts, said that there are, where do I have it here so I can get you the number? They say that they know of 1,019,000 inhabited worlds that they know of, right? Now, if you are interested, if you've ever read the Urantia book, which is about Earth and the universe, they say that Earth's planetary registry number is 5,342,482,337,666, right? Melchizedek says that they are in charge of over 10 million worlds in this universe, right? We're
That's
just
only
talking,
this universe.
that's only this universe.
There are
It's
millions
not-
of universes.
There's
not billions.
absolutely. And then each universe has its own vibratory dimensional overlays that go out as we ascend and we ascend and we ascend and we ascend. And you know, we all of the planets are schools. This one is teaching us duality, how to use our heart instead of our mind, service to humanity instead of service to self. Other planets like Venus are about unconditional love, but really unconditional love. We know what that is, but that world teaches you that. Other worlds may be scientific. It could be all different kinds of things, but we will always go back to Melchizedek. And we would call it the University of Melchizedek because it's this universal school, and it not only teaches people from this universe but other universes because it is such a renowned school. So there are 490 planets from one end of the universe in the mirror system to the other, and each school has its own curriculum. So one planet is just for starseeds, where they train starseeds before their incarnation missions, right? And then before they go, they'll say, you're going to be born into this person, you're going to have this characteristics, this is what you're going to have to overcome by this age, this is what you're going to have to overcome by that age, we're going to wake you up at this age, we're going to blah, 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 blah. And then that's where, you know, then they watch over them. And usually, if you notice, that anybody who knows that they are a star seed, primarily their own race comes to wake them up and is sort of their gatekeeper in this process, because it's their part of home that they can reconnect into, right? So I have found that with lots and lots of star seeds that I have spoken to over the years. So it's amazing that there is such a concentration to help this world move out of what it's in. It's like a big experiment and that kind of thing. There are other worlds where there are lots of different colors of people and things, and they all work in perfect blend and harmony and all of that. And the one thing I think that they believe in most is that wonderful line, when you help one, you help all. Right? it goes back to that thing like the Clarion race. They go back, they believe that we all came from the same one primordial atom that expanded out, and that because we are all from the same cell, of course, we are all one. Now, there's a whole different thing when you're on Earth, because you can say that, but we all have our own things with sexuality, colors, race, all kinds of things that lots of people have. And that's part of being dualistic, so that you can see that. And the beautiful thing about at the end of your lifetime is when you have your life review, is you are going to feel all of the people that you hurt. You're going to feel all their feelings. And that is going to make you want to
Reconnect.
make up to those people. So that's why even if you have readings, they'll say, oh, your grandma's here, she really wants to say she's sorry for how she treated you or whatever. They really want absolution, because they don't want to be in that little box of pain of feeling what everybody else felt. So and if somebody was a racist in this life and they were against one color, when they come back in the next life, they're going to be the other color. It has to balance out, right? It really and truly does. I had a friend who was a comedian. She owned a bar, and she there was a white guy in there, and he was very racist against Chinese people. And he had nobody, and he died. So you know what she did? She buried him in a Chinese cemetery.
We
Made a
actually,
lot of friends.
Yeah, he had no friends at all. But anyway, you know,
we have a question from Christine she'd like to ask.
sure.
Hello, thank you, Jennifer. I've attended these talks for years and really enjoy them, but for me, they're somewhat of a foreign language because I really don't invest enough time to understand everything. So different words, I don't get it. I can't keep up with everything. I'm just wondering, and I don't, I mean, I didn't really even look at what your book's about, but I'm just wondering is there a book that's like what do you call that? Oh, what are those books? For dummies, a UFO for dummies book. And I'm serious. I'm quite serious, because it really is hard to grab on to everything that's being said on these talks when you can't, like, I wish there was like a little. So do you know of any? Does your book present in such a way that I would learn
Well, you
how to
would
understand it?
you would from the UFO Hotspot Compendium, because it's stories about a lot of very famous UFO cases and the places where the most UFO sightings are, and what happens in those places, and what has been experienced there. In the ET Almanac, this one, I actually took real contactee cases, right? And I went to all of those publishers, and I got access to reprint those. And I also went to current contactees and did that. And then in some cases, I went to several people who are known as hybrids, right? Now, it's like us, right? I'm a mutt of Europe. That's what I am, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing about a hybrid, is that we do know that ET beings can inject their DNA into an embryo that's been fertilized, so that that person will be smarter than the average bear. It's not like they're going to look like them. They take those things out. There are many ways that hybrids can come about, but that's one of the ways. By the way, our government primarily only hires hybrids because they know who the hybrids are, because they are so super smart,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So they definitely have a lot more intelligence than the normal human being, that kind of thing. But I would just say you're not going to learn it all overnight. I've been doing it for well over 30 years. I'm still learning. You never stop learning, but take it in as much as you can take. If it becomes overwhelming, step away for a while. And when you feel like you want to go back, then go back and learn a little bit more and that kind of thing. So,
And what would be a first book that you would recommend?
well, do you want to learn about, well, I think for what we're talking about tonight, I think you'd probably want to get the UFO Hotspot Compendium.
Is that
Right.
your book that's
That's
posted?
this one. Yeah, that's this one.
Okay, great.
Do you
Well,
have
thank you.
do you have the link in there, Jen?
I
where
do.
they
There's a
where
link on the
they-
website.
Yeah, where you can get it directly from me and I'll sign it for you.
Okay.
If you like that. And that will give you a big overview of a lot of the cases. And I'm sure you've heard Jen talk about Travis. And I mean, I found it fascinating to have all that new information that I didn't know that was in there. I just found that fascinating. Even in Giant Rock and Integratron. I mean, the sisters that own the Integratron and through the Integratron archives, and Barbara Harris, they both said to me, they said, you dug up stuff that we didn't even know, right? That kind of thing. Like over all this time, there was never a rendering of what Salgonda looked like. So I hired an artist and I took all of what George said in all his interviews of what he looked like, and I had an artist recreate him in the book so people can have an idea.
I'm going to jump in for one more question.
Sure.
That one person that you were talking about, which I didn't follow completely, the one that's alive and I don't know what.
Valiant Thor.
Yeah, I can't even understand that word. Is that explained in the little book that you're in your current book that you're recommending?
Yes, I do have a little bit about Valiant Thor in there as well. Yes.
Okay, Valiant Thor. Is that
Valiant Thor is a created being who does not have a belly button. He is born of the Godhead.
Okay. That's interesting to me. I'd like to learn about that. Thank you. That's all.
Yes, and you can also, if you want to learn more, you could go to strangeratthepentagon.com. That's my other website. Okay. You can watch the short film there. I have the short film on Amazon Prime. But also, if you really want to learn even a lot more, I have Dr. Frank's Strange's. His out of print books are on there, including Stranger at the Pentagon, which is about Valiant Thor.
It's strangers at the Pentagon.com.
No, stranger, just stranger at the Pentagon.com.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Ronnie has a question too.
All right.
Well, of course, I'm very curious about the women who were with Val Thor. And also I would like to get your take. I hear that there are people channeling from Val Thor. Do you give any credence to any of that?
I don't know what they're channeling, so I really couldn't say.
Okay.
I think it depends on the channeler's consciousness and how far advanced they are. I tend to not want to poo-poo anybody, because it's their experience. And I'm a firm believer that everybody has their own experience. I've had many people say to me, even a MUFON state director found me years ago and said, I've been having this man come to me in my dreams, and somebody gave me Stranger at the Pentagon, and I looked it up and I saw you were making the movie. And so I'm calling you And so that's,
Mhm.
you know, so I told her more about him. So there are those incidences as well. And but what was the other part of the question? I know
Well, I was curious about the women that that were around Val.
well, he has a vice commander named Teal,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Teal is 5'7". She has red hair parted on the side and it's shoulder length that comes to about here. She has green eyes, porcelain white skin. She is one of his right arms. Her and Vice Commander Dawn are Valiant Thor's right arms. And so they sometimes will go on missions for him in his name if he can't go. Teal flies a lot of the crafts around, the ships, the motherships, the starships, things like that. She's also a cosmic teacher. So lots of people do go on board in the astral who are star seeds, and she teaches them as well. Dr. Frank started telling me at a certain point, you know, oh, I talked to Teal and she says you're going to the night classes. And I said, well, I don't remember. And but then after about a month or two, I started remembering, and then I could see and then all of a sudden I knew what the entire inside of the craft looked like. I knew how the history coin machine worked. I was getting little glitches and things like that. And Teal did appear to me one day while I was meditating, because a lot of times I call it the mind internet. When you're meditating, they would pop in different races and beings, and you get a click at the back of your neck. It goes like that. And then they're inside, like your eyes are open. And I saw her, and and she was standing in front of Victor 1, right? And it was just such an amazing experience. And this was 10 years before I met Dr. Frank.
Wow,
Yeah, 10 years before I met Dr. Frank. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and she actually once, I was hospitalized with a bowel obstruction, and they were going to have to operate. And only my one friend knew about it. She had come and got me in the morning, took me to the doctor. They put me in an ambulance, took me to the hospital. My friend stayed with me until they put me in the bed at night, which was late. And that night, I woke up in twilight, and I felt a zillion little tiny bubbles going through my intestines. And I felt Teal standing over me, and I heard her say, "You'll be fine in the morning. You don't have to have that operation," right? So then I sort of went back to sleep. And when I woke up, it was like early in the morning. Sitting at my bedside was Dr. Frank. And he said, Teal called me early this morning, told me to get down here to tell you that she fixed you up last night. And I was just, I mean, you know, that right there sealed the deal for me,
Yeah.
right? That sealed the deal for me because I've never met them in person. I've seen them up
Mhm,
here,
mhm,
right? And telepathically,
mhm.
but I
Yeah.
would love to meet them in person, but I never have,
Oh,
right? And they don't really meet people in person anymore. It's just not a thing they did. They did it when they were enthusiastic, when they came in the 50s and 60s. All of them did, but they just don't do it anymore. They do it more this way now,
mhm, mhm.
right? So,
Yeah.
but she's amazing. She teaches cosmic people about duality because they have no idea of what that is. And they bring people on astrally, and they also invite people that they feel would benefit from coming on board Victor 1 or the Starship. And I know of one person who was invited to do that and had the most miraculous experience, right? That just seeing this whole other world of what we would venture to seem as fantasy, that it really is out there, and that kind of thing. So I always say, you know, I did a radio show a while ago and the guy was negative and said, oh, you can't prove it, prove it, prove it, prove it, you know. And I said to him, I said, do you believe in God? And he said, yes. And I said, prove it. You know, I
Yeah.
just say stay open, listen to all these stories, piece it all together. What works for you works for you. And you know, because we all have our own individuality and what we formulate in our minds and in our brains and that kind of thing. And some of us just like won't let go of it, like me and Jen, and we just keep going and want to learn more and more and more and more, and then share what we've learned.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, and he Val Thor is married to a woman named Deena, Deena, and they did have a daughter
Mhm.
in the 70s named Valdina. They just put their names together and named her Valdina.
Mhm.
I do not know. Dr. Frank would know if he had any other children. I do not know if he never told me that, but I would assume he would have known if he knew him from 1959 to 2008, right? So you know, because I interviewed him before I wrote the script for 2 years,
Mhm.
every single week,
Wow.
right? So yeah,
Wow. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
you're welcome. You're
Is
welcome.
Dr. Strange still alive?
No, he passed away in 2008.
That's what I thought. Right.
Yeah, he did, and I knew he was going to, because they showed me being a pallbearer at his funeral one day. I had the image, and I knew that Val was keeping him alive for us to have this time together, right? Because he had had many operations where he should have been dead, and he wasn't. And I knew that they were, I just knew intuitively they were keeping him alive so that we could have this time together, and him teach me everything, you know, that kind of thing. I once, when I was interviewing him, he started going into some really amazing esoteric stuff. And when I looked at Dr. Frank's eyes, they weren't his eyes. They were, I was like, that's him. He is directly now talking to me. And some of the things he said were like unreal. I mean, it was like so incredible. And later on, I said to Dr. Frank, do you remember when you told me about this? He goes, I never said that. So I was like, okay, I get it. Yeah.
Well, I will pray that you have lots of money coming your way to make this.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to make it so the world
Yeah.
can enjoy it.
I want to see
Right.
it.
Yeah, I think it would be really good. And I think it's a good thing for the world to see that there are beings that care about them,
Mhm.
that are here doing that are doing what they can do, but they have to let us take our own path. They
Mhm.
can give us suggestions and things, but if we make those mistakes, we have to live with them. And that's basically what it is, right? He was never going to force them to do anything, right? In fact, Dr. Frank said that Val can, you know, he can read minds. He said a lot of them thought he was too soft, but they didn't realize the inner strength that he has. He's not going to force them to do anything. It has to be of their own accord.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
Right.
yeah, amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you to you, Craig, very much.
You're welcome.
Coming
Thank
on and
you.
sharing with us all these wonderful stories and your personal, interactions with the whole story of Val Thor. It's
Yes.
really significant. And I will keep you in the loop about what's happening
Yeah.
in High Bridge.
Yes.
That if that can come off, and of course I'll let the mainline MUFON people know about it,
Yeah.
so they'll be able to be informed.
That'd be awesome.
We actually have another Californian who's going to present next month. You probably know Preston Dennett, do you not?
Yes, of course. He's
Preston
awesome.
has great presentations. So he will be with us next month on the 13th of December. So you can look for Bambi's, constant contact memo. She'll put it out. And I hope to see all of you next month at that. And thank you, Craig. If we get to California for the Whole Life or the New Life Expo, I think it's Conscious Life
Conscious
Expo,
Life, yes.
we'll look you up and say hi.
Perfect. Let me know. I'll come down and visit
That would be really great.
you.
Thank you. And I'm
Thank
going to
you
say thank you and
all.
good night to
Good
everyone.
night, everybody.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Blessings.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Good night. Turning.